Hi, I'm Mr. Criscione. Most of you know me as your school counselor from Springville High School. During the spring 2020 lockdown here, I thought I would maybe make a video or some videos regarding some common questions or common things that I talk about in meetings with kids, and sort of maybe use that as a way to sort of get you thinking ahead a little bit while we're all still apart here. So I think career in terms of what direction someone heads after high school, is something that we try to talk about quite a bit, try to focus our course selection on and a lot of other things on. In ninth grade, you might remember we did an activity, probably was in the LMC, that involved the New York State Career Zone. This is an interest inventory that matched your interests up with various careers that you have a similar interest to. Now, these things aren't magic. Sometimes they hit right on to things that you've been thinking about, and sometimes not so much. So when we sat to talk about your schedule, we might have referenced some of the things in there. We might have just talked about other things that you've indicated interest in. Something else that is part of your career plan that sometimes I've used when talking to kids is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. This is a good place to go and to look for specific careers and to get some data on there. So I have up in the search box, I just deleted it, accountant. And if you go in here and hit up the data under this, the Occupational Outlook Handbook is put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it will reference tax returns of folks who have indicated that they do this particular career. So you get some nice data from them in terms of median pay, typical entry-level education, the number of jobs, is it growing, those kinds of things. This isn't perfect either. These types of things end up working best in a scenario where there is a very clear-cut path to do the thing that you're interested in doing. So if it was an accountant, or if it was a math teacher, if it was something that there's a pretty well broken down path to do, these are great resources. Not everything is that way. A very common thing that I get told that students want to do after graduation or do eventually is to become a lawyer or an attorney. And that's one that, besides it being a graduate level pursuit, in other words, you need to go on to law school, which comes after a 4-year education, there can be different paths towards that. You don't have to major in all the same thing as an undergrad. So that is a type of career that I would look at and say that there are multiple pathways to. The same thing would go towards someone who works in a counseling field, is that there are a number of different pathways to get to working in that kind of field. So we have some things that are pretty well laid out. We have some things where there's multiple pathways, which at least I can sort of talk about what those things are. And the last one is probably the most difficult one for me to discuss with kids, and those are pathways you have to discover. If a student were to come to me and say, Mr. Criscione, I want to be someone who creates content on YouTube and sort of like builds a followership on YouTube to the point where you can monetize those YouTube streams, or that could be on Instagram or any other social media platform. That's a viable career for some people. Most of I have a outside interest in music. Working as a musician or a songwriter or someone in that field is also a very viable career. It's one that the career paths to that are things you kind of need to discover. And when I talk to a student about something like that, there is no college program for becoming a YouTube influencer or becoming someone who is a top 40 star or something like that. When I talk to kids about something like that, and if there really is no well beaten down path, sometimes I'll suggest that they start at the end point and work backward. So in those cases, sometimes if a student can access someone who does something similar to what they would hope they'd be doing, and ask them through email, through some sort of messaging, if they can get them on the phone, great. How did you get to where you were? You may find some things that hadn't occurred to you. I don't know every career path or every possible way of accessing different careers, but particularly ones that have a sort of a path of discovery are the ones I struggle with the most. So if something that you're interested in sounds something like that, my suggestion would be to see if you can access somebody at the end of that chain, or multiple people at the end of that chain, and talk to them virtually, through electronic means, maybe through the phone, or maybe if you can meet with them, about how they got to that point. It might give you a sense of how to begin that path. Okay? Let's assume, for the sake of showing you some other things, that you have a sense of what you think you want to major in. So how do you find... My dog is going crazy here. Luna, go lay down. How do you find a college that has the particular major you're looking at? How do you figure that out? Those are things I can help you with. I'll tell you how a lot of people choose to do that, which has some value and sometimes can be overvalued. Is they look at a piece of mail they got, or a friend or a family member, or some sort of discourse that they had with a college rep, and they place a great value on it. I heard from someone that they went here and it's a great school, and that's why it's top of my list. And I think when someone is working towards senior year of high school, maybe they're in their junior year or even their sophomore year, I think the job at that point is to start amassing possibilities, and not necessarily eliminating them. So I wouldn't discount things like that people have said, but I wouldn't stop there, because single data point arguments sometimes fall apart under scrutiny, and when you start holding them up to the light of other things that are important to you, sometimes they make sense and sometimes they can fall away. So I think the first thing I would do is to consider your individual circumstance. Not only what do you want to major in, but what type of school are you interested in? Because there are certainly great deals of differences between different colleges, differences in size, differences in location, differences in sort of setting and culture, urban schools, suburban schools, rural, isolated schools, access to various things that may be important to you with that school could be something. And then, of course, cost is a big one. When I say consider your personal circumstance, at some point, that is usually something that comes into the decision factor with families. I'm not saying cost should eliminate anything from you at the front end of things, but sometimes when you start looking at a college, it can be a concern. So let's try to do some sort of looking at schools a little bit. One of the first things I might do when considering a college is to do sort of a wide-reaching search. Now, this is the high school guidance webpage, and if you go under exam information, you're going to see something from the SAT. SAT you've probably all heard about, most common college entrance test our kids take. If you hit that link up, you're going to go to a site that looks like this, collegeboard.com, and people think that this is the only place that this is where you go to register for AP, where you go to register for SAT. It's also a good place to start a college search, because this is accessible from any computer anywhere. And one of the things I like about it is you can start to filter schools based on different things that might be important to you. So some of the filters they have in here would be test scores and selectivity. Sometimes the first thing a student wants to do is sort of put in, well, this is what I got on the SATs, or this is how selective a college is. You can do that here. You can just select by colleges based on their overall admission selectivity. Sometimes this is valuable, and sometimes to not select schools below where you think you can get into admission-wise could be something that is a mistake, because you might be able to garner some more money from schools that aren't quite as selective as you're setting your sights on. So those are things that you can do. Location is a very popular one. If we said we wanted to look at schools within 200 miles of 14141, we went from 3,000 schools to 236 schools. So again, the beginnings of this process are things that you want to do to sort of narrow this down. 236 schools is too many to look at, but we might be able to, whittle that down a little bit more by looking at, certain majors. Like, what if I said, if I could spell it, accounting. Okay, so now I'm down, to half of that, 131 schools that are within 200 miles of Springville. They have some sort of accounting program. One thing that I would, when you hit type of school, public, private, are things that you can do to limit that more. Size of school is something that you could use as a preference. There are other, search parameters that you can look at in here as well. Let's look at just four-year colleges that have accounting. Now we're down to 100 schools. Still too many to look at, but we're getting there. And as we go down this process, some students are looking for a particular sport at a college. Here's a place where you can, here's a place where you could access that. And there are other parameters going down here too that you could use as a way to get things down to a usable list. So this is a method to do sort of a wider ranging search. Honestly, I'll talk to many students who will say things to me like, I really want to look in the New York State public system. Is there a way that I can search for just that? And yes, there is. Let me just go to the main page here. If you go to SUNY, there it is, SUNY.edu in the search engine here. This is the New York State system. It will look at just New York State public colleges. New York State public colleges, both 2-year and 4-year, are in this system. It also will look at undergraduate programs, which are the first 4 years of college, and graduate programs. So to do some searching on this, we'd hit the Programs tab. Try that again. There we go. Scroll down to undergraduate programs. And then there's two ways that you could search a major here. One is by keyword. So we could just search something like math teacher, all right, since I happen to have that in here. And it's going to give you anything within the New York State system that has anything to do with math education, okay? Now, math education is a 4-year program. Some of these may be 2-year transfer programs, so let's narrow that down a little bit and just say bachelor's only. Okay, we still have 19 different things in here that, show bachelor's only. So this brings me to a great point about college searches, and that is the same thing that you probably know from, your outside life, is that no search engine is perfect. If you think that a college has a particular program and it's not coming up in the searches you do, then go to their website and look, because that's probably the most accurate place to look for information about a college. Whether it's the SUNY site that I'm showing you here, or the College Board one, which searches public and private schools. If you can't find something that you think is there, go right to the college's website. But you'll see from this that we have adolescence education mathematics. We have mathematics 7 to 12. If you click to open one of these, it will show you every SUNY that has that particular name, adolescence education math. If you open up math education 712 here, you see just one. This is Buffalo State versus a whole bunch of other ones. I will tell you that it's the exact same major. That one of the things about SUNY and one of the things about college majors in general is that very often the same major is called the exact same thing at different colleges. So you have to sort of get to a point where you drill down a little bit and look to see at a college's website what they're talking about. So if I go back to this, I'm going to open up this math education piece, and we have Cortland. Okay. So if I click on SUNY Cortland, and I want to look at this in more detail, you can go drill down, get to their website. And now this is really where you will start sort of evaluating something at a deeper level. To find out more about that major, very often you have to go and look for something like academics to see different departments. We'll talk about admissions and financial aid later, but in this case, if I'm looking at for academics, I would look under departments. Here's the math department. Now it could be, it could be listed somewhere under education, but okay, here we go. Pay dirt. Adolescent education, mathematics 7 to 12. So this is where, and this is how you would do some research on a college to get probably the most current things that they're publishing out there about this particular program. SUNY also has, they also put out a nice comparison tool. They put out an admission profile chart that looks something like this. That, if I blow this up a little bit, you can see across the top here they have campus name, campus size, the middle 50% SAT or ACT scores, and the middle 50% high school average. So just looking at the top one here, SUNY Albany, it's a school of about 13,500 undergrads. Middle 50% had an SAT range between a 1050 and a 1310, or an ACT composite between 23 and 27, and overall high school average between 88 and 94. If you scroll over a little farther on this, they will talk about some other things that have to do with Albany. Do they have an honors program? Do they have a teaching certificate program? Do they have joint admissions with other schools? An EOP is a financial aid and support program for first-time college students. Do they have early admission or early action? And we can talk about that a little more when we talk about applying. So SUNY does have this nice chart. This type of information is available out there for private colleges. It's just not so concisely put in one place. So if I were to look at like Canisius's website, and we were to go into drill down, do the same thing here, we're going to look under academics, we're going to go look at undergraduate programs. They may talk to you there about the same sort of things. In terms of getting into Canisius, most colleges should do a reasonable job explaining that. Let me click over this on their admission page, where they talk about how to apply, and they talk about some of the requirements. And give you a sense of where their typical admission student stands in terms of SATs and high school, SATs, ACTs, and high school average. So this kind of information is out there. I think that, putting a college on your list, we got to make sure that it has the major you want. We got to make sure that we feel like we may be able to get into this college admission-wise. so that, looking at your high school average and looking at if you have standardized testing scores, are they in the range that the college is looking at? Sometimes if you're close, that would be something that would cue you to want to retake SATs or ACTs again. Sometimes if you're in the range, you still might want to do that. And I'm going to go back to a Canisius slide here, the Canisius webpage, I should say, to show you a reason that might be. This time I'm going to go into a different area of it. Let's see if I get off that. I want to go into scholarships. So here's a piece on freshman merit scholarships. And one of the things that you'll see is Canisius offers a tier-based scholarship system, which means there's this benefactor scholarship, the dean scholarship, all the way up to the Ignatian scholarship here. These are based on a couple different factors: a minimum SAT or ACT score and a high school average range. And you can see as you go from the bottom to the top that the dollar amount increases as your combination of factors in this case goes up. So thinking about that, if you go and you drill down, you look at a college's website and you say, okay, well, high school average wise, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get in, and my SAT scores, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get in. One of the things that might drive you to take those SATs again is if you look at that chart, what if you were right on the edge of, the two scholarships where if you got another 50 points in your SATs or another 100 points in your SATs, you might net another, $2,000 or so a year. That would be something that might drive you to retake that test. So I said something earlier about why if you're a really competitive student, you don't want to just search colleges that have the most competitive admission standards, because sometimes if you aimed your sights a little lower, you may find a college that is able to offer you through financial aid some more money. So this is kind of the process that I would go through in terms of whittling this stuff down. My goal when I meet with a senior in the fall is not to know where they go to college. My goal is for them to have a workable list. That we can look at and say, okay, how are we going to apply to these? In order to get on that list, I would be going back to sort of those factors from your circumstance. What's important to you? What are the things that are going to govern your choice of college? Do those things fit that thing? In terms of where you end up in that choice, that is something that really comes a long way down the line. Really, in most cases, that ultimate choice doesn't come until the spring of a student's senior year. There's another process called financial aid that comes right after you apply to colleges, and we'll talk about that, if not in this video, in a subsequent one. But that is something that really is sort of an important piece of the puzzle that gives you more of an apples to apples comparison between different colleges. So fall of senior year, I'm looking for kids to have a short list. To me, a short list is, more than one and maybe less than double digits, although I've had kids go well into double digits. Most colleges, if you're not somebody who is, currently getting free or reduced lunch or something like that, where we could get you a application fee waiver. Most colleges have, this is ballpark because it changes, but most colleges have a $50 application fee. In some cases, you might get that waived if you're an athlete or if you go for a college visit or things like that, but it's a ballpark to consider. So when somebody's looking at 10 colleges, I think, okay, well, that's $500 in just out of your pocket, college application fees. Is there anything we can do to squash that list a little bit? Is there anything, school on that list that there would be no way you would end up going to? So that would be something that, we talk about in the fall. But let's say you have this list of 6 to 8 colleges, and that might be high. Let's say you have this list of, somewhere between 3 and 6 colleges, okay? I think you're at a point in the fall that, you can start, making applications. And somebody might ask, well, but I haven't visited them yet. Shouldn't I visit them? And you can visit them. You could, in some cases, if these colleges are a long way off, distance-wise, you may want to do that between your junior and senior year. This particular year, there might be some limitations on that, but if a college is more accessible to you outside of the school year, sometimes that's what students have to do. The one thing I would caution you about is let's make sure that college, before you go on a college visit, make sure you've done the research to make sure that it's something that really belongs on that short list. I think that, I've said this at some of the meetings we have with parents, is that, going on a college visit is kind of like taking a car for a test drive. There's lots of cars that I'd love to test drive. Not every single one of those cars could I afford to buy. And sometimes taking a test drive of something that isn't going to fit admission-wise, or isn't going to fit cost-wise, or isn't going to fit, in terms of transportation-wise or things like that, it can be a difficult thing. So I would make sure before you step on foot for a college campus that it is something that could possibly be on your short list and sort of satisfies those criteria. One other word of caution about that, not caution, but just advice about college visits, is make sure they know you're there. Particularly colleges that are close to us, Fredonia, UB, Buff State. A lot of times juniors and seniors have older brothers and sisters or friends or cousins that go there, and they say, oh, UB, I've been there 10 times. Like, I know that place. I mean, I've visited, been to the dorms, I went to a couple basketball games. That's great, but admissions doesn't know you're there unless you tell them that you're there. And it's good to go and get a behind-the-scenes view of a college. That can be very important. But it's also good to get on admissions radar. And believe it or not, they do track what kids have come to visit colleges. They do that for really a reason of economics. If you go back to this admission chart here for a quick second, take this top school, SUNY Albany. They have 13,000 undergraduates. Okay, 13,000 undergraduates. So, roughly, we're looking at, somewhere in terms of freshmen, you're probably looking at somewhere, in the neighborhood of, 3,500 freshmen every year. I don't know how many applications they get, but that's a lot of applications to go through. And if you're looking at two students who are on the line between accepting them, or two kids who are on the cusp of a scholarship tier, wouldn't you want to give it to the student that you knew had actually been there? Because, quite frankly, a lot of schools get added to kids' applications as sort of safe schools, or they get added, we're going to put a SUNY on there just so we have another cost look at this. Which I think is a good plan. I think everybody should have a public school on their list, because it does give you, a different financial aid picture than most private schools will give you before financial aid. But regardless, if you haven't been there, that could be a decision point for them for some of those things. So I would, if a college is going to be on your list, if at all possible, I would do an official visit so that they know you're there. So how do you apply to this big list of colleges? Well, like I said, if it's 3 to 6 colleges, you look at those and say, okay, are they a combination of public colleges and private colleges? Or are they all New York State public colleges? If they're all New York State public colleges, honestly, I think the fastest way to do that application would be to go right back here to the main SUNY site. You'd hit the supply link over here on the right. I think if it's only SUNY's, the SUNY application, though it might be a multi-part thing, is still faster than Common App. It's not any cheaper, but I think it might be a little bit less time spent. But if it is a combination of public and private colleges, you want to look at, okay, how is it that I can apply to these colleges in the most efficient way? And is there a way that saves me some money? So to demonstrate that, I'm going to go back to Canisius for a quick second here. Let me just cue this up in my other window here. Okay. So this is undergraduate admissions. If I select that, you see that this little page, it says Canisius College application, common application, okay? Now, in some cases, if you hit this Canisius College application, you're going to go there, and I'm not saying this is Canisius, I haven't even checked, I'm just using this as an example. You're going to go there and find that if you apply directly to them, they'll take it for free. If that's the case, great, because in Common App, it almost universally will cost you. I mean, you can go check, but very often, there's a college application fee for that. But sometimes there's no break for that. And if that's the case, then I might go back and hit this other link and look at Common App. Now, what Common App is, this is going to come up in a different place here. I actually don't like this window, so I'm going to start a new window and just start web search on Common App. This is a nicer place for it to start with. Common App is a place where you can do one application and it may be accepted in a number of different places. The first thing that I usually do here is look, and let's see if the college that I'm looking at is one that they support. So we kind of know the answer to this one, but let's say we look Canisius College. Yes, it is. What I would do is go back through. Let's say we also wanted to apply to Brockport. SUNY College of Brockport. Yes, it is. Let's say we also wanted to apply to University of Rochester or RIT. Those are all Common App schools. So essentially a Common App is one application, a common application, which you would go through. It's more lengthy than a SUNY app, but there is simply one part to it. SUNY apps sometimes have a second piece that you've got to do, but it's more lengthy. And you'll go through, and at the very end, you add the colleges that you want to apply to. And based on the colleges you add, it'll tell you how many letter of recommendations are required from teachers. If there's a personal statement that you have to write or an essay that you have to write, it'll kind of tell you of all those things. With letters of recommendation for Common App, what you would do is you put in the recommender's email address, and they get an invitation from Common App. Now, let me tell you, that's all good and fine, and it's very nice. Common App makes it easy to keep track of. But the first notice somebody gets from you that you would like them to write you a letter of recommendation should not come from Common App. It should come from you directly. And if it's somebody that you're separated from by a great distance, like if it's you're asking a coach who's no longer in the area or something like that, I guess email's got to suffice. But I think in most cases it should be direct contact, phone call. If it's a teacher, you should talk to them personally and say, hey, I'd like you to write me a letter of rec. I wouldn't go crazy with those things in terms of if Common App is asking for 3, I would give them 3. I've had kids who go out and ask every teacher they've had to write them a letter of recommendation. If Common App is looking for 3, that means they're probably going to read 3. That means that whatever colleges are on that list are really expecting to see 3. So if you give them 9, they're going to pick 3. And they might read more than that, but let's be honest, these folks, when you look at 13,000 undergraduates, they've got a lot of evaluation to do. So by providing a lot more recommendations than they're asking, you're sort of taking the risk that they may not read your best one. So I would ask the 3 people who you think can write you the best recommendations. I would also try to guide those people a little bit. I don't know if it makes sense to have 3 math teachers. Even if you wanted to go into math education, I don't think that makes sense. So if you could do something where you have a combination of academic teachers with somebody who sees you in a different light, maybe a coach, maybe a music teacher, I think that may portray you as a little bit more of a complete person. What I usually tell teachers when they ask about writing a letter of recommendation is talk about what you've seen. The most valuable thing a teacher can write about in a letter of rec is firsthand knowledge of a student, what they've seen in the classroom, what they've seen in a lab, what they've seen in terms of work you produced. At some way, shape, or form in that application, you may want recommenders to talk about outside of their classroom things. Sometimes counselors are asked, and we can do that as well. What I would make sure you do if you're going to give a recommender an activity list or something to help them fill out a letter of recommendation is you highlight things that you only want them to talk about. Because when colleges get 3 different letters and they all read the same thing, that doesn't really help you. If they can hear different types of things from every letter, a little firsthand experience, and then also about some additional activities, I think it puts you, in the best light. So Common App, maybe how you apply if you were going to apply to a combination of public and private colleges. SUNY App would be, what I would look at first if you're applying to just New York State public colleges. One word of caution for community colleges is within the SUNY App, within this, you're going to find every community college within the New York State system. And some community colleges have very unique 2-year programs that you wouldn't find in other places. In most cases, applying to a community college outside of your community is going to net you an application fee, college application fee. However, if you're from Erie County, which many of our students are, and you apply to ECC, if you apply through SUNY App, they may charge you a college application fee. If you go directly to ECC's website, and this is kind of what I showed you to check earlier on Canisius, and you go to apply, you're not going to find any application fees here, okay? Erie County residents are able to apply for free. So I would always say, in all cases, look at the college first, see if they'll let you apply for free on their site. If they did, the extra, half an hour it takes to fill that out, to save $50 or $60, I think is probably worth it. If not, you look at the most efficient way that you can apply. So it looks like I've been talking here for 37 minutes. I don't know if I've kept anybody this far. I think I will do another of these on follow-up with financial aid and some of those things. And hopefully this is helpful and informative. I feel like this is the type of conversation I have a lot with kids individually. So at least this is maybe a way that I can begin some of that with kids. Please feel free to email me or reach out through Google Classroom if you have questions, and we can talk about them individually. Thanks.